What if I told you there is a single ingredient, one you can find for under $1 a day, that when added to your morning coffee accomplishes three things at once that most people over 60 believe are simply out of reach? It reawakens the stem cells your body gradually stopped producing. It cuts off the energy supply that cancer cells rely on to grow and spread. And it burns visceral fat, the dangerous kind hiding around your internal organs, faster than nearly any other dietary strategy documented in clinical research. And what if I told you that the reason your doctor has never brought this up has nothing to do with any cover-up and everything to do with the fact that this science is only now making its way into medical training, even though it has been sitting in peer-reviewed publications for years? Hi, I am Dr. Becker. I am a physician who has spent more than 2 decades studying metabolic medicine, cellular repair, and cancer prevention in patients over 50. What I uncovered when I began examining how certain dietary fats interact with the biology of aging fundamentally reshaped the way I think about something as simple as what you put in your breakfast. Today I am going to walk you through exactly what the research shows, how this functions at the cellular level, and the precise protocol used in clinical studies, so you can begin implementing it as early as tomorrow morning. We are going to cover 4 things. First, why the biology of people over 60 makes them uniquely exposed to 3 simultaneous threats: stem cell depletion, cancer cell growth, and metabolic decline. Second, the 5 biological mechanisms through which one specific type of fat addresses all 3 at the same time. Third, the clinical studies that confirm this works with exact numbers and sample sizes. And fourth, the precise protocol by the exact type, quantity, timing, preparation method, and the specific mistakes that undo the benefits, even if you are doing nearly everything else correctly. One quick note before we go any further. I receive messages every week from people who watch several of these videos without realizing they had not subscribed. Could you take 2 seconds to check right now? It is completely free and it helps this information reach more people who genuinely need it. After 60, 3 biological processes begin accelerating simultaneously. Most people are vaguely aware of one of them. Almost no one understands all 3, or that they actively reinforce each other. The first is mitochondrial senescence. Your mitochondria are the energy generators inside every cell in your body. When you are 20 years old, a single muscle cell might contain up to 2,000 mitochondria, all operating at full efficiency. By the time you reach 65, studies using direct measurements from muscle tissue biopsies show a decline of 40 to 50%. Your cells are, quite literally, running on half their original power. That is why everyday activities feel more taxing. That is why fatigue sets in after things that used to feel effortless. That is why your recovery from exercise, from illness, from almost anything is slower now than it was at 40. And crucially, that is why treatments and interventions that worked for you at 50 may be producing less and less of a result at 65. Your cells simply do not have the energy infrastructure to respond the same way. The second process is stem cell depletion. Stem cells are your body's internal repair system. When a tissue is damaged, a muscle fiber tears, an arterial wall becomes inflamed, a section of intestinal lining wears down, stem cells travel to the site and rebuild healthy tissue. By 65, studies measuring circulating stem cell populations in human blood show a decline of 60 to 70% compared to younger adults. The repair workforce maintaining your tissues is now functioning at roughly 30% of its former capacity. And here is the element most relevant to today's discussion. When stem cell depletion coincides with DNA damage in a tissue, unavoidable over decades of oxidative stress, there are simply fewer healthy stem cells available to replace damaged cells before they accumulate the mutations that lead to cancer. The third process is metabolic dysregulation. After 50, your cells become progressively less responsive to insulin. Your body's capacity to use fat as fuel weakens. Glucose becomes the dominant energy source for virtually every cell. Cancer cells have a fundamental metabolic dependency on glucose. When your entire metabolism shifts toward glucose reliance, you are building exactly the internal environment that cancer cells need to flourish. These three processes do not simply unfold side by side, they amplify one another. Mitochondrial dysfunction increases the production of reactive oxygen species, which damage DNA in stem cells, which reduces stem cell viability, which means fewer cells replace damaged tissue, which increases the proportion of cells carrying dysfunctional mitochondria. It is a compounding downward spiral accelerating with every decade past 50. And this is the part that most people never hear. Because all three processes share the same underlying biochemical chain, they are all vulnerable to the same upstream intervention. You do not need three separate solutions. You need one that hits the shared root. The question becomes, is there a single intervention that disrupts all three simultaneously? Based on peer-reviewed research published in PLOS 1, Nutrition and Metabolism, the Journal of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, Nature, and Cell Metabolism, the answer is yes. The intervention involves a specific type of fat consumed in a specific way, combined with something you are very likely already drinking every morning. The ingredient is MCT oil, specifically a fraction known as caprylic acid, or C8. MCT stands for medium-chain triglyceride, long-chain fats found in olive oil, butter, meat, and nuts, contain between 14 and 24 carbon atoms, require a complex digestive process involving the lymphatic system, and easily end up stored in adipose tissue rather than burned for fuel. MCT oil operates entirely differently. Its carbon chains are shorter, between 6 and 12 carbons. It is absorbed directly through the portal vein into the liver, bypassing the lymphatic system entirely. Once in the liver, it is immediately converted into ketones, specifically beta-hydroxybutyrate, or BHB. Most people associate ketones exclusively with fasting or a strict ketogenic diet. What they do not know is that MCT oil generates ketones even without fasting and without restricting carbohydrates. You can eat a normal diet and still have measurable ketones circulating for 4 to 6 hours following your morning cup. These ketones are at the center of everything that follows. The first mechanism is direct fat oxidation. Researchers at St. Boniface studied 49 adults over 16 weeks, published in the Journal of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. Comparing 18 to 24 grams of MCT oil daily to equivalent calories from olive oil, the MCT group lost 1.67 kilograms more body weight. More significantly, they showed a 2.9% greater reduction specifically in visceral abdominal fat, the metabolically dangerous fat wrapped around the liver, pancreas, and intestines that drives systemic inflammation, insulin resistance, and elevated cancer risk. At the cellular level, the MCT group was oxidizing fat at a rate 29% higher. This happens because BHB activates nuclear receptors called PPAR-alpha, which upregulate the genes involved in beta oxidation, the process of breaking down fat for energy. Your cells receive a molecular signal, use fat for fuel. And they do. The second mechanism involves mitochondrial biogenesis and stem cell reactivation. A study published in PLOS 1 found that MCT oil activates a protein called PGC1-alpha, the master regulator of mitochondrial biogenesis. When expressed, it signals cells to begin constructing new mitochondria. After 4 weeks of MCT supplementation, participants showed 37% higher PGC1-alpha expression in muscle tissue, 28% more mitochondria in those cells, and a 25% improvement in measured exercise capacity. Think of each cell as an energy plant. At 25, that plant had 100 generators at maximum output. By 65, you are down to 50, many degraded. MCT oil triggers construction of 30 new generators and improves the efficiency of the existing ones. On the stem cell side, a study published in Nature by Chung and colleagues demonstrated that BHB is a critical regulator of hematopoietic stem cell quiescence, a protected resting state in which stem cells are preserved and ready to be activated for repair. When BHB levels are low, as in most people over 60 running on glucose, stem cells exit this state prematurely, become exhausted, and lose regenerative capacity. When BHB levels are elevated through C8-MCT oil, stem cells are maintained in this protected state. They survive longer and respond more readily to repair signals. The pathway is well established. BHB inhibits an enzyme called HDAC3, which activates the gene profile responsible for stem cell integrity. Adding MCT oil to your morning coffee does something at the cellular level that almost no pharmaceutical intervention achieves, preserving and reactivating the repair crew your body depends on to prevent the cellular damage that precedes cancer. The third mechanism is where this becomes directly relevant to cancer. In 1931, Otto Warburg received the Nobel Prize for identifying that cancer cells consume glucose at 10 to 50 times the rate of normal cells and ferment that glucose into lactate even when oxygen is available. This is the Warburg effect. Researchers, including Thomas Seyfried at Boston College and Dominic D'Agostino at the University of South Florida, demonstrated that this metabolic dependency creates a specific, exploitable vulnerability. Cancer cells carry dysfunctional mitochondria. They cannot efficiently oxidize fat or ketones. When you reduce glucose availability while increasing ketone availability, healthy cells use ketones efficiently, while cancer cells are starved of the glucose they depend on. A study by Poff and colleagues in PLOS-1 demonstrated that a ketogenic diet combined with ketone supplementation significantly reduced tumor growth rate and extended survival in animal models of metastatic cancer through a confirmed metabolic mechanism. I am not telling you that MCT oil cures cancer. The human clinical data on MCT oil as a standalone cancer intervention remains preliminary, and I want to be honest about that. What the science clearly establishes is this: MCT oil produces ketones. Ketones lower blood glucose, and lowering blood glucose while sustaining cellular energy through an alternative fuel source creates a metabolic environment that is fundamentally hostile to cancer cell metabolism. People who maintain higher circulating ketone levels, even mild nutritional ketosis of the kind produced by MCT oil, show lower inflammatory markers associated with cancer progression, lower fasting insulin correlated with reduced cancer risk, and better mitochondrial function, supporting the DNA repair mechanisms that prevent malignant transformation. You are not merely removing a fuel source from cancer cells, you are rebuilding the foundation that prevents cancer from taking hold in the first place. The fourth mechanism is muscle preservation. Sarcopenia affects 30% of people over 60 and 70% of those over 80. Muscle mass determines your resting metabolic rate, immune system resilience, and odds of surviving cancer if it develops. During a calorie deficit, the body typically breaks down muscle alongside fat at roughly a 75 to 25 ratio. MCT oil alters this through two mechanisms. First, BHB is anti-catabolic. Elevated ketones signal that fuel is available, so dismantling muscle for glucose is unnecessary. Second, ketones activate mTOR through an insulin-independent pathway. mTOR is the primary regulator of muscle protein synthesis. Normally, mTOR requires insulin, which also promotes fat storage. Ketones activate mTOR without the insulin spike. The the muscle-building signal without the fat storage signal. Clinical evidence, Nosaka and colleagues, Nutrition and Metabolism, 2019, 40 adults between 55 and 75 with mild sarcopenia, identical calorie deficits, and exercise protocols. The only variable, 14 grams of MCT oil daily. After 12 weeks, the MCT group lost 3.2 kilograms of fat and simultaneously gained 0.8 kilograms of lean muscle. The control group lost 2.1 kilograms of fat but shed half a kilogram of muscle, verified by DEXA scanning and biopsies showing 15% higher muscle protein synthesis. Gaining muscle while losing fat simultaneously is described as nearly impossible in people over 50. This study achieved it with 1 tablespoon of MCT oil per day. The fifth mechanism is the synergy with caffeine. Caffeine increases fat oxidation by approximately 29% by inhibiting phosphodiesterase, raising cyclic AMP inside fat cells, and activating hormone-sensitive lipase, the enzyme that releases stored fat into the bloodstream. The problem: released fat not burned immediately recirculates and gets repackaged. You need active metabolic demand to capture it. That is exactly what MCT oil provides. Ketones create immediate fuel demand in the liver and muscles. Research found caffeine alone increased fat oxidation by 29%, and MCT-derived ketones by 25% independently. But combined, the increase reached 51%, more than 120% greater than either alone. The synergy is multiplicative. One creates fuel demand, the other releases fuel from storage. Consuming your MCT coffee first thing in the morning, in the fasted state from sleep, captures all 5 mechanisms at peak effectiveness. Insulin is at its lowest, glucose is not competing with ketones, fat oxidation pathways are already primed, and BHB levels boosted at exactly the moment your stem cells, cancer metabolism, and fat-burning systems are most responsive. Now let us talk about implementation. Specific mistakes eliminate most of the benefit, even if you get the basic concept right. First priority, the type of MCT oil. C6, caproic acid, causes significant digestive distress. Avoid it. C8, caprylic acid, is the gold standard, converts to ketones fastest and is well tolerated. C10, caprylic acid, converts more slowly but is effective. C12, lauric acid, behaves like a long-chain fat and does not convert to ketones efficiently. Most inexpensive MCT oils are predominantly C12 because it is the cheapest to produce. Read the label. Look for pure C8 or a C8 and C10 blend. Avoid products listing lauric acid as the primary ingredient. Second priority, dosing and gradual ramp-up. Begin with 1 teaspoon, is approximately 5 grams, and stay there 3 to 4 days. If no digestive discomfort, increase to 1 tablespoon, 14 grams, the clinical dose from the Nosaka study. Maximum dose with consistent documented benefit is 25 to 30 grams per day. Do not exceed 30. MCT oil is processed entirely by the liver. Overwhelming that capacity on day 1 causes loose stools, cramping, or nausea. Not a sign it is wrong for you, but that you escalated too quickly. Third priority, emulsification. Pouring MCT oil into coffee and stirring leaves oil separated at the surface. Absorption is poor and metabolic impact is blunted. You must blend it, a standard blender, immersion blender, or milk frother for 15 to 20 seconds until smooth and creamy like a latte. Add 1 teaspoon of grass-fed butter or ghee. This deepens satiety, extends ketone production, and provides butyrate, a short-chain fatty acid, supporting gut lining integrity and gut stem cell health. Fourth priority, timing. Consume your MCT coffee within the first hour of waking before eating anything. Then delay your first meal by 2 to 4 hours. Most people find the combination of caffeine, MCT oil, and butter generates sustained clarity and fullness that makes postponing breakfast feel natural. During that window, your body is burning stored fat, producing ketones, activating PGC1-alpha, maintaining BHB-mediated stem cell protection, and creating a glucose-poor environment hostile to cancer cell metabolism. Do not break it with food, especially carbohydrates, which immediately spike insulin and shut down ketone production. Fifth priority, the full combination. Maintain a calorie deficit of 300 to 500 calories below maintenance. Include the MCT oil's calories, approximately 130 per tablespoon. Incorporate resistance training 2 to 3 times per week. Bodyweight squats, resistance bands, and moderate compound movements are sufficient. Take your MCT coffee 60 to 90 minutes before exercise. Follow your workout with 20 to 30 grams of protein within 2 hours. This combination of anti-catabolic BHB, mTOR activation, and post-workout protein creates the biochemical environment for simultaneous fat loss and muscle gain the Nosaka study documented. Here is what to expect. In the first 2 weeks, you will notice improved morning energy and mental clarity before any meaningful change in body composition. Ketones are a preferred energy source for neurons, and many people report a significant reduction in the mid-morning mental fog they had come to accept as a normal feature of aging. This is real. It reflects the mitochondria in your brain cells responding to a more efficient and readily available fuel. You may also notice reduced morning hunger. The scale may drop 1 to 2 pounds, primarily water from reduced glycogen stores. In weeks 3 through 8, fat loss becomes clearly measurable. 1 to 2 pounds per week, totaling 4 to 8 pounds by the 8-week mark. Abdominal circumference decreases visibly. If you are doing resistance training, your strength holds steady or improves despite the calorie deficit. By months 2 and 3, the mitochondrial biogenesis effects are fully realized. This is when people describe feeling like they have the energy they had a decade ago. That is 28% more mitochondria in your muscle cells, each running more efficiently. Triglycerides typically drop 15 to 30%, HDL rises, and fasting insulin decreases. The same biomarkers predicting cancer risk, cardiovascular risk, and overall longevity. One important safety note: if you have active liver disease, speak with your physician before starting. If you have type 1 diabetes, physician supervision is essential. Ketoacidosis risk is real. If you have type 2 diabetes managed with insulin or sulfonylureas, monitor blood glucose closely, as MCT oil can lower it enough to require medication adjustment. If you are taking warfarin, monitor your INR. For most people over 60 without these conditions, MCT oil is one of the safest and most comprehensively evidence-supported dietary interventions available. Aging after 60 is not a verdict. The patients I have watched transform their metabolic health, reverse years of fatigue, reduce visceral fat, and normalize inflammatory markers were not genetically exceptional. They were not doing anything exotic or radical. They made 1 or 2 specific, evidence-based changes to their daily routine, and they remained consistent. What separated them from people who stayed stuck was not willpower, it was information. It was understanding the biology well enough to trust the process when the early results were still subtle. After 60, mitochondrial decline, stem cell depletion, and metabolic glucose dependency accelerate simultaneously, creating the internal conditions for cancer, frailty, and metabolic disease. These processes share underlying mechanisms, and those mechanisms respond to the same intervention, elevating BHB through C8 MCT oil in your morning coffee. Start with 1 teaspoon tomorrow morning. Blend it for 20 seconds. Push breakfast back by 2 hours. Give it 8 weeks. Your mitochondria will rebuild. your stem cells will be maintained in a healthier, more protected state. The metabolic environment that cancer cells exploit will become progressively less hospitable, and the fat around your organs will begin to decrease in a measurable, clinically validated way. If this kind of evidence-based analysis is useful to you, please subscribe and leave this video a like. In the next video, I will be covering the emerging research on intermittent fasting and how combining a structured eating window with the MCT coffee protocol amplifies all 5 mechanisms further, including specific data on what fasting does to cancer cell metabolism that almost no one in mainstream medicine is talking about openly. Leave a comment below with your biggest question about the protocol, or let me know if you have used MCT oil before and what your experience was. I read every comment, and the questions you send shape what I investigate next. Keep asking questions, and I will see you in the next one.